Pro-Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be. All right, welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live. This is our regular Friday afternoon live talk show about the business of cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and every week I am joined by my pal, David Rabinovitz. David, again, thank you so much for being there.
My pleasure, Jimmy.
And do you want to introduce the panel? I'm going to let you do that because I know that next week I'm going to make this announcement. David Rabinovitz is going to be hosting for me so I can get 48 hours in the wilds of Maine, okay? And visit some old friends up that way. And I believe that you're going to the bullpen and you're bringing in the left-hander, Curt Dalton, to co-host with you. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It's going to be a great show. Jimmy, I just hope we don't have to replace it.
No, Wally Pipp. That's who it was. I feel like Wally Pipp. Curt, isn't that the guy that Lou Gehrig, isn't that the guy, right? I'll never come back.
Everybody needs a middle relief guy, a lefty coming out of the bullpen, Jimmy. Watch out.
All right. Well, we want to introduce everybody in the room here. Deon Osburn is with us. He's the managing editor of the Black Wall Street Times, and he wrote a piece this week that caught my eye enough that I tracked him down and convinced him to join the panel here on Friday afternoon. Deon, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy and grateful to be here with y'all.
There you go. And you're actually in Oklahoma. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. And Bart Shaneman is with us as well. And he's an assistant editor, maybe I got your raise, for MJ Biz Daily. Bart, where are you? You're in Colorado, are you not?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least, one of my favorite people that I've been able to interview over the last year or so. Her name's Jamie Pearson. She's the CEO of Bhang Corporation, and she joins us. Where are you joining us from? Because I know you're all over the world, Jamie.
Today, I'm in Montana.
All right, Montana. Awesome. That's right. Well, thank you. And appreciate you joining us all on Friday afternoon. So I'm just going to go right around the room. And actually, we're going to start with Jamie, okay? Because I really want a perspective from your perspective of what you saw the U.S. senators unveil last Wednesday with this new CAOA. Why they couldn't call it the Much More Act would have been a lot better, but CAOA is what we've got, the Cannabis Administrative Opportunity Act. What were your impressions of it when you first read it? And can you believe you actually saw the day that the U.S. Majority Senate leader introduced such a thing?
Well, I actually did a little bit of work with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and helped answer some questions from the industry perspective about things like interstate commerce and edibles and milligram limits. I was on a panel of women CEOs that Kirsten approached around things like this bill. So we sort of had an insider view ahead of time about what was coming and how the politics were playing out behind the scenes. So I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler alert for me to say, yes, I knew this was coming. And I was, sworn to secrecy, I'll say. When I finally saw the draft that was released, if it passes the way it's intended to, there were some pleasant surprises in there from my perspective. One was I was quite surprised that they just suggested descheduling cannabis altogether rather than bringing it down to a Schedule II drug or something like that. I think that would have been terrible. So I was happy to see that. I'm not surprised that the Dems couldn't get a good set of initials that made some sort of sense, but they're not very good at that. Not a priority. And then I hope to see that it doesn't get watered down too much and that there isn't too much nonsense that goes on. I'm not hopeful that it will be anywhere near what it is now, but that's the things that I'm worried about that they're going to do is just the shenanigans it's always involved in politics. What I'm hoping is that interstate commerce remains, and that they ask for some guidance from medical professionals around milligrams, because there's this constant desire to limit the number of milligrams in edibles and to put onerous packaging rules around edibles. And being an edibles manufacturer, that's near and dear to my heart. I would like to see them do some common sense approaches and ask industry professionals before they get these rules too far down the road. The other part of it that I'm excited about is the potential to have banking and advertising and insurance. So we'll see what happens when it all shakes out.
Yeah. Bart, your impressions of the bill? I'm sure you've looked at every one of those 163 pages.
Well, I think kind of to Jamie's point there too, like I think, the one danger with this is that it maybe tries to do a little bit too much, but I mean, there are a lot of things here. I think the other thing, the 280E tax code reform, like that is constantly, brought up with all of our reporting, and, just such a huge burden for every company in the industry and any plant touching company anyway. And being, somewhat proactive on that and to eliminate it, I think would be great. It's cool that they've got stuff in here that's a social equity component too, and trying to, help out economically disadvantaged people, people hurt by the war on drugs. And, these grant programs is great. I mean, when I do my reporting on the challenges behind the social equity provisions and getting more diversity and people of color in the industry, kind of the number one obstacle is just the lack of funding that these people have access to that are trying to apply for these social equity licenses. So if these grant programs do work in their favor and help them to get some kind of capital up front. I mean, it takes a lot of money to start a marijuana company and wait for regulations to come through, and you're sitting on real estate and all these things. So yeah, the grant program part of it is really cool. I mean, it would really change the industry if this thing could go through. I mean, I think it's a long shot. I think that getting everyone to vote for it, I think it's going to be a pretty tough hill to climb. But I mean, it's the most comprehensive thing that we've seen so far, and that it just in itself, I think is a good sign.
Right. And it's a negotiating ploy to go in and ask for everything so that you can see what you want to live with and what the other side can give back and all that. Deon, your impressions of what you saw, and we should say that you are an editor for the Black Wall Street Times. I don't want to belittle your position, sir.
No, I think you had it right. But okay. Just to piggyback what Jamie and Bart said, I pretty much agree on those points. I think the fact that it's even being brought to this level is going to have, an effect on what states end up doing, now that they see it's more socially acceptable. But I do have concerns if we can't even get an infrastructure bill passed, how we would get cannabis passed. I do see, some issues there. But I think the fact that it intentionally addresses the war on drugs and how, Black and brown people are disproportionately arrested for, God's gift to earth. It really makes an impact there, because a lot of the ways in which it was criminalized in the first place has to do with racialization and things like that. And so I think it does try and change people's perspectives about it, for sure. And so I'm hopeful that if it doesn't even get passed, at the very least, it will cause some shifts on the state level.
And, I think the first thing you got to do to right or wrong is recognize it was wrong. And I think they have done that. And to be honest, I always thought God's gift to earth was Curt Dalton. So, Curt, what's your impressions? What's your impressions of the bill? Because I haven't heard those yet.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to steal from everybody. They just took a little bit of my thunder, but I wrote the article actually the next day that came out. First reaction was the 25% graduated marijuana federal tax. That's going to keep the black market alive and kicking forever. You had Senator Booker saying he would stop the Safe Banking Act. in lieu of this, he will not pass it. And he's actually stepped back from that now. We wrote a piece on that. And the interstate commerce is exactly right. Huge right there. With that, if that can stay in, it would be great. And then, yeah, like as Jamie said, with some inside information, like Schumer has been doing this for 50 years, literally, or 30. He's not an idiot. He knows he doesn't have the votes. He's well short, like over 10, and you need a lot of those Republicans. So there's got to be something, I hope, behind the scenes. And he's thrown it out there like he did on The View the other day. Like, we're just throwing it out there saying, what don't you like? Talk to us. And he will either change it or work with you. So let's hope that, politicians know what they're doing here at this stage, and they know that here's the opening offer. Now let's work it and let's get this done. But like, cross our fingers, like Jamie said, let's hope.
And David, as a guy, go ahead, Jamie, go ahead.
To Deon's point, where he's worried about them not being able to pass an infrastructure bill. An infrastructure bill isn't sexy. It doesn't get votes. The general population doesn't understand it, isn't probably watching it too much, but constituents are watching the cannabis voting situation. It's a hot topic, and it's going to generate revenue. And what all of these states understand is that this is a revenue stream that's brand new. It's coming from the illicit market, the legacy market, and they're actually, instead of having a monopoly money situation where they're going to take money out of this legal bucket and put it in this legal bucket instead, because the Republicans like this bucket versus that bucket, and that game they keep playing, they get a brand new bucket to go pull money from. And that's sexy. And they're all very interested in it across the aisle. So what Senator Gillibrand talked to us about was that they did have a strategy, for a very specific strategy about approaching the Republicans and going to them and saying, it's important to both of our parties that we get something passed so we can go get money from this new bucket. Tell us what you want. But this was basically, like you said, the initial pass, take their temperature and see what's going to happen politically. And then the other point that I want to make is that our group of female CEOs, the one thing that every single one of us asked for was 280E reform. And the one thing we demanded was a provision in the bill that had money available for Black and brown people and for women trying to get into the business, because there's new statistics. I think it was MJ Marijuana Business Journal that published that, the women CEO situation is dropping drastically year by year. So we have a group of people sitting in prison that need to be addressed and that need to be brought into this market, with open arms and with an acknowledgement that they've paid the price for all of us to be here. But then also that, we're in prohibition. We can make the industry look any way we want. And what we want is parity.
Right. Absolutely.
Amy really hit it on the head. And Deon, keep something else in mind. The marijuana bill is just a marijuana bill. It's 163 pages. The infrastructure bill is volumes and volumes. I don't know that anybody other than people in DC or folks really in the infrastructure industry have actually read it. And the few articles I have read about it talk about there's all kinds of stuff thrown in there, which is what legislators do, that have nothing to do directly with infrastructure, right? This is just marijuana. It covers all the facets of it, kind of like the slices of an orange. You got the restorative justice funding through the SBA, social justice, small business protections, whole bunch of other things, but it's just marijuana. And I think that's it would be nice if when they put bills together, they actually stuck with the subject matter of the bill versus what goes on in DC.
And speaking of what goes on in DC, I'm guessing you guys brought up the infrastructure bill. This is the political game, right? Hey, if you give me a little over here, I'll give you a little over there. And, how can we find, are they going to talk to each other? That's the most important thing. Bart, I got to ask you directly, can cannabis be what everyone in this room knows it can be? Bringing people together, It's like, hey, Curt, we should go down to DC and pass a joint inside the chamber just to get everybody to chill out and talk to each other. Bart, is that ever going to happen?
Well, people have tried that. People have taken joints down to Capitol Hill and rolled them on the steps. And
it didn't work, did it?
It wasn't the kumbaya moment they hoped, I think. But
was it two guys that do Vote Pro podcast?
Right. That's right. And that Vote Pro podcast is certainly what it's all about now, too. Deon, go ahead, Bart. I'm sorry.
I mean, what Jamie was saying too about this revenue stream, I mean, that is the key thing there. That's the most attractive thing about all of this, is that we're coming out of a pandemic. We're looking for ways to, a lot of these states that have had, industries leave, Rust Belt states, places that are suffering economically. I mean, this is one of the easiest ways to add some kind of revenue to your coffers, tax money, and use it to build schools. I mean, you talk about infrastructure. I mean, take marijuana tax money and use it to build roads. I mean, so yeah, I do think that it can bring people together over that key point, that if you want jobs, if you want money coming into your state, legalize marijuana.
Right. And then in Massachusetts, there's a bridge that needs repair in I-93. This poor truck blew up a bridge. Deon, part of this, and Cory Booker was adamant about this. I love his passion, by the way. Talking about this being a social justice bill. He wants everybody who can see the injustices that have gone on about cannabis would like to see the opportunity to expunge a lot of records of people that have been incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis possession crimes. Doesn't it make sense? We're also suffering from an economy right now where you can't fill the jobs out there. Doesn't it make sense to give the hopefully ex-prison population an opportunity to get some workforce development and get into this industry?
I mean, absolutely. You look at Oklahoma, and I would encourage, all the senators to look at Oklahoma. Even though we've only passed medical marijuana, the law is so liberal that as far on the patient side, you don't have to have any qualifying condition. You simply go to your doctor and say you need it and give them whatever reason you want, and you just pay them a fee and they give you it. On the business side, $2,500. And, they're adding a lot more regulations now, but it's still very much more loose than, say, Arkansas, which I believe when they were first considering it was only going to award 3 or 4 in the whole state dispensaries. And so you have to look at places like Oklahoma, where, you look at the politics of it, it's very conservative and you wouldn't consider that. But it has worked so well for us that, we're not really struggling that much economically. We've actually been able to have a cushion and put hundreds of thousands into a rainy day fund. Just the 6 months of 2021, the OMMA was reporting that we've earned almost $150,000 from tax money, local, state, and then in excise tax for marijuana. And so it works, and that's just medical. That's just with 10% of Oklahomans having a medical card. And so I think that it just makes perfect sense, like Bart was saying. And yes, I mean, Oklahoma is the 3rd highest prison population. We have the 3rd highest prison population and the highest for women in the world, and so just, imagine that, and a lot of it is for simple possession, and so for these companies that maybe don't pay the highest wage starting out, whining about not having anyone to fill those spots. Like you're saying, we have plenty of people who are willing to get out there and get started, and so it just makes perfect sense socially and economically. But at the end of the day, yeah, it is the right thing to do. One thing I think that is important to consider and to watch is how, if it is passed, how it would translate into making sure it's equitable. Because we do have issues even with Black dispensary owners here in the state. I will point you to a man named LaRue Bratcher, who is facing a murder charge because he shot a burglar outside trying to get into his grow operation, and his cannabis license had lapsed at the time of the shooting. And so there are some equity issues that, we need to keep in mind, but I think it just makes perfect sense.
Hey, Curt, as someone who can recognize an opportunity, if it makes perfect sense to everybody on this call, why the hell can't it get done? Curt, I'm going to let you take it.
I think, Deon, correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't Oklahoma have the most dispensaries now of any state in America, or is it by population?
I try not to say the most, but I do believe by per capita, yes.
Yeah, like that's one of those trivia questions everybody will get wrong unless you're really, everybody in this group might get, but 99% of the world would be like, no way.
Hey, Curt, what do you like? You think the idea of cannabis trivia live streamed would be a good one?
Maybe on the
Oh,
night
Jamie
of
said
legalization,
yes. I like that. Good. We're going to do that.
Like dropping the ball,
Fun.
midnight show. Yep.
No, well, I don't know about midnight. I think,
Yeah, we're
you know
old.
me, I'm old. So it's probably good. And East Coast time, evening time at sunset is really, I have an opportunity to do it downstairs at the Great Walk here in the greater Boston area. And I think we're going to do that. We're going to have some fun. And I think you'd be a great co-host. I'm just saying. Okay. And I can pretty much promise you libation and food. How's that?
Fair enough.
All right. Jamie, I do want to get back to something that you did bring up. It's a serious question, and it has to do with women at the C level in the cannabis industry. You're 100% right. I saw that same item that I think it was 2017, 37% of cannabis companies had female CEOs at that level, and now it's down to 8. And how does that happen in 4 years? Can you explain that to me? Or maybe I'm being naive.
I can explain it. I will tell you that this is the general procedure of how things work. It's not always this way, but this is generally what works, is that when a company's in trouble and or is a startup, or the work is difficult, or there's not a good chance of survival, those are typically the opportunities where a board will take whoever will take the job, and they'll offer a job to a person of color or a woman and go, well, hey, do you want to be in the C-suite? And they'll hand you something, and it's really difficult, and they turn it around, and then the job is typically taken away and given to someone who has the experience to scale it. And so what you'll see is in the very beginning, when there were a lot of women and a lot of people of color in C-suite positions, a lot of these companies were in trouble. Many of them got acquired. There was consolidation, and then you take the more qualified applicant. And so what we've seen is through consolidation, through the demise of companies that were already on the ropes and where positions were given to less qualified people, that's typically how that works. And the statistics show that companies run in a C-suite by predominantly people of color and predominantly women don't have the greatest survival rates. But when you dig deeper into that statistic and you ask yourself why, you find that it's typically because those companies were already in trouble when those opportunities were given. So that's generally why that is the case.
Deb Borchardt at the Green Market Report helped me on a story with Stormy Simon, which she took over High Times. And I didn't know what the glass clip was until Deb explained exactly what you just said.
Sure.
Part of our story was Stormy was given that job, and let's just say was unsuccessul.
Stormy's a girlfriend of mine, and I know exactly what happened to Stormy, and it's a very, very typical situation. I got lucky. I got put in a situation where the company was not doing well, and I've turned it around, and we're still here. And so far, knock on wood, they're not trying to get rid of me, but who knows?
That's not wood up there. You actually have a very good brain, Jamie. Don't discount that, please. That's not, I think there are more opportunities should be given to women and people and those have been most impacted by the war on drugs. That's what this plant was put on this earth to do, was to give it equal right to grow it, to share it, to respect it. And God, you don't have to look any further than the Rastafarians in Jamaica. They get it. Okay. It is a religious experience for them. And I just don't understand getting it through the heads of our leaders. Now, the people want this. Okay. Now take that bill, give me 2 or 3 wins, and I think the industry can be happy. I think, if we get rid of the 2A, if you deschedule it, the whole industry is going to be happy. If that's the only thing that happens, and it's still up to the states individually, and there's no interstate commerce, okay, can you live with that, Jamie?
I'm living with it now. It wouldn't be my preference, but I'm living with it now. Gotcha. But I've seen a white paper circulating around about the very basis in the law that allowed states to have legal medical cannabis initially when they were fighting against the federal government, is the basis of the law for allowing interstate commerce, and that may actually be challenged outside of this bill. So we've got some hope. The one thing I would like to say though is that cannabis in itself as a plant, I think, is going, as the usage becomes more ubiquitous, and we're starting to see beverages take hold, and we're starting to see people replacing alcohol. We're starting to see more and more people using cannabis. The one thing I believe will happen, and this is just my opinion, is that as people start using cannabis, they're going to have a deeper experience in their own minds. And I do think that empathy will grow in our culture, in our communities, in our people, and we will start to see the plant actually start changing minds. So I think that while we're fighting for it to become legal, more and more people are using it, and we're starting to see this collective intelligence and empathy grow. And I think the plant will transform our country and our world for the better.
It's almost like a perfect storm right now, because we're coming off the worst year and a half of most of our lives for the most part, and things are aligning. I want to get final thoughts from everybody here as we wrap this thing up. Deon, having Jamie on this panel makes me feel much better about the whole thing. How do you feel?
Same. I mean, I don't have any type of communications with any senators, so I'm going to take your word on that, and so that does give me hope. And so, we'll be watching closely. And I think it also is a responsibility on us as media to be more active and more intentional in letting people know what's going on about this.
Well, all I could keep telling people is like, share, and subscribe to Pro Cannabis Media and MJ Biz, of course. Bart, your final thoughts. By the way, a quick compliment. You weren't here to hear this, but David Rabinovich did say that the MJ Biz daily recap of the bill was the best one on the internet. So congrats on that.
Yeah, well, that goes to my colleague, Jeff Smith. He's the one that did that, but yeah, thanks. I think we have a good team here, and we're trying to do our best to cover everything, but no, I mean, I see all of this as just another turn of the screw, another step forward in progress. And I think we've been patient to this point, and to continue to be patient, and just kind of, hope that, as Jamie said, this slow kind of gradual acceptance of marijuana is going to continue to work in the industry's favor, and it's all going to play out the way it's supposed to. Might not be this year, but it's definitely going to happen at some point.
Curt, final thoughts on that?
Just a couple of things that everybody said. Schumer's quoted the 75% Americans want legalization. If you deschedule it, you're definitely going to have interstate commerce. It's just not going to be above the board. It's going to be below the board, because now the penalty for getting caught is going to be very minimal. And let's just hope Schumer's got a plan. I mean, I don't think he wants to look foolish. He's done this a long time. He must know some things. Hopefully that they can get this through, even though it looks a little bleak. But we all want to see some version of it get through. So
there you go. Jamie, is your product in Massachusetts dispensaries yet?
Almost. We're with True Leave, and they're producing it. So very, very soon.
Well, I know the new business development guy. He's a great guy. And perhaps I can, put a little plug in for you, because you've been terrific with us, and I thank you very much for that.
Are you talking about Camilo?
Jason, I think his name is.
Jason. Yes.
Yeah.
His new, yeah. Jason's head of wholesale sales, and we're in almost daily contact. Yeah, he's great.
There you go. Well, now you can tell him that you know me. Anyway, I don't know if he'll hang up on you or not. David, I wish you the best of luck next week with Curt. Thank you for filling in for me.
You got it.
All right, that'll do it for another edition of Green Rush Live. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't go away, because Weed Talk News is coming up next.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media, supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.